Good day. My name is Jose Santos P. Ardivilla. I am a PhD in Fine Art student at the Texas Tech University School of Art. I am a political cartoonist, printmaker, animator, and a writer from the Philippines. Today I shall be talking about Plastic Nation, Filipino contemporary artist, and the plasticity of identity. There was a joke that maybe we should change the Philippine flag and just foist a huge torn plastic bag as the banner for the country. Plastic materials have been so ingrained in the current problems reflective of ecological damage and economic diminishing that there are contemporary young Filipino artists that deal with the notion of nation weaving through plastics. To these artists, the nation is no longer an imagined, simplified, glamorized monolith, but a series of infractions. Nation is no longer a unitary mode of national symbols, but a dispersion, a felt sense of collapse, or always being attentive to the threat of collapse. These artists explore nation and identity as a series of attrition by using plastic materials as an indication of national and individual duress. As I discuss these artists, I am bracketing their works in what T.J. Dimas wrote in Decolonizing Nature as Politics of Ecology, which, quote, recognizes that the ways we regard nature carry deep implications and often unacknowledged ramifications for how we organize society, assign responsibility for environmental change, and assess social impact, end quote. These three Filipino artists are Marcelino Mars Bugaoan, Renan Ortiz, and Leeroy. All three have used plastic materials in their exploration on the meaning of plastic in the lives of the Filipinos. Plasticity in this presentation does not only hinge upon materiality of plastic in Philippine contemporary art, but plasticity as a series of operations of adaptability in which plastic can be molded literally and metaphorically to situate certain pressing issues in Philippine society. For Mars Bugaoan, plastic is rendered as a cartographic material for placemaking. Renan Ortiz sees plastic as a ritual of consumption. Leeroy uses plastic materials as an extension of the body to recalibrate our sense of humanity. Responding to the surroundings is what Bugaoan has been doing in his most notable works. In 2014, he utilized a site-specific installation to activate space to change or at least disrupt the meaning of a place. Bugaoan used a decrepit warehouse at the University of the Philippines Diliman campus. The art piece called Crawl had an interesting exhibition note hedging upon Bugaoan's directive of survival. He explains, and I quote, "This exhibition depicts a magnified portrayal of the invasive forces of nature that slowly damage the foundation of a structure. It also seeks to reflect upon the potential of plastic to be transformed through manipulation, grounded on the creation of forms which signify a dialogue between the vulnerability and power. Crawl explores the ideas of transformation and decay not as images of total disintegration, but as narratives of survival." End quote. Bugaoan's narratives of survival has yielded an art installation that changed the warehouse from an oft-ignored decaying building into a breathing art space, which plastic tendrils are perversely biomorphic as it spills from the flaking concrete and rickety wooden slats onto the ground, snaking its way on the grass. Bugaoan nailed the plastic onto the ground to stabilize it. He perforated the plastic for the grass to jut out. This is a time-based installation piece in which, after 25 days or so, verdant greenery sprouted from these holes, indicating a struggle between environmental, ecological issues and plastic. This was also indicative of the overlapping invasions of nature and the Anthropocene as a means of integration and transformation. However, we are unsure about who wins, or is the domination not the point? Was this a reclaiming of nature? Bugaoan goes back to disintegration as narratives of survival. The nature we long for, the pristine vision bereft of human destruction, is not what Bugaoan envisions as survival, but a sad display of plastic as protozoan-like scabs on skin. Humans have changed nature and made it aberrant or disease-like. In Bugaoan's hands, plastic is transformed from unsightly pieces of trash into modes of warning and reckoning. It is also too easy for environmentalists from the global north to castigate the Philippines for its rampant usage of plastic bags. However, it has been pointed out that these so-called experts are not familiar with the reality of poverty that brings about ecological degradation. Homelessness has prompted many informal settlers to set up makeshift homes on stilts near riverbanks or by the shore. These shanties, of course, are not equipped with proper waste management systems. Waste matter is placed inside bags. These are then dumped into the waters. These clog up drainage system, so when typhoons hit, Manila gets flooded. Many of Metro Manila's middle and upper classes have decided to stop using single-use plastic bags. Instead, they use canvas bags to carry the things they purchase. However, there are still so many households who continue to use single-use plastic bags. The upper-class establishments such as Starbucks have announced that they would do away with plastic straws. While this is admirable, it is almost farcical considering that plastic, climate justice, and ecological issues are imbricated in the abject poverty of the Philippines. Ecology is directly tied to issues of political economy or the lack thereof for the Filipino masses. These upper-class assertions of being more mindful consumers do not reverberate among the majority of the Filipino households who are forced to consume various goods piecemeal. The colloquial term for this is tingi-tingi. It is when people in a financial pinch would buy goods in small packets who are quite reliant on plastic usage. Many Filipino households who use and reuse plastic bags as a reaction to restricted access to resources. It has become a ritual for many Filipinos and even for many Filipinos abroad to set aside undestroyed plastic bags for further use. This has been dealt with in time-based performance and archival art piece done by Renan Ortiz. From May 2005 to April 2006, Ortiz embarked on pilot project E-Posit, which entailed the artist to draw from the many plastic bags he kept in his household. Ortiz has used plastic as a vehicle for material investigation. He states, and I quote, "At the minimum, I hope to make sure that the amount of plastic we consume in our household would not go to the ocean as trash. That was basic. Second, it was to document the amount of plastic we consume. Thirdly, I wish to document the process and see how the data information can help in raising awareness regarding plastic usage in a typical Filipino household." End quote. To do this, Ortiz had to recalibrate his daily existence to focus on the very things that have been flippantly tossed aside by many. In his careful processual gathering of these plastic bags, there has been a sense of changing the notion of these plastic bags as disposable. Ortiz has remarked that in the process of gathering, he had to reconfigure these plastic bags in a way for them to be given a proper preparation for archiving purposes. Ortiz claims, and I quote, "It was a ritual because I cannot let the plastic stay in the trash unwashed for a long time. Cockroaches might infiltrate, so I had to wash them as soon as possible. I had to hang them out to dry. Almost every day there was a plastic bags hung in our yard. Once dried, I store them in plastic containers. I separate the clear plastic bags from the white plastic bags and those that are colored." End quote. In this project, Ortiz appends the easy recognition of plastics as mere disposable material to a ritual of accumulation which proved to be overwhelming in just a year. He states, and I quote, "For the project, I want to answer the question, how much plastic do we use? It would have been simple on paper to collect plastics in the household, but I realized I had to wash them to avoid hygienic issues for storage. Add to that the fact that I had to document the process because the output is the collected plastic." End quote. Ortiz is adamant that he did this project not as a means to exotify poverty, but to compound the message on how intrinsic the material of plastic is in Filipino households. Ortiz reiterates, and I quote, This is not to aestheticize the plastic, but rather to record how much a typical Filipino household in the capital would consume. End quote. Plastic has been part of ritual for modern consumption, which was propelled by the growth and expansion of the Philippines' emerging economy. And yet, plastic has been a stalwart reminder of an Earth being frantically pushed to the brink. Once something so synonymous to modern life, it has become a fraught symbol of ecological fragility, and as Ortiz has pointed in his project, as something that has become a ritual for many Filipino homes constantly threatened by economic violence. In Aliens in Manila, Leeroy New collaborated with performers who put on his wearable pieces made from plastic materials found at home or donated by supporters, in which he would assemble and thus make them look like aliens are indeed among us. The concept of aliens may be informed by the pop cultural reference of beings from outer space, but Leeroy New's visuality is geared towards us aliens as monstrous bodies living among us in monstrous situations. According to Jeffrey Jerome Cohen, and I quote, "The monster's body quite literally incorporates fear, desire, anxiety, and fantasy, ataraxic or incendiary, giving them life and an uncanny independence. The monster's body is pure culture, a construct or projection. The monster exists only to be read. The monstrum is etymologically that which reveals, that which warns, a glyph that seeks a hierophant." End quote. These recast plastic materials into otherness are glyphs in which Leeroy New is the hierophant. Monsters are what are considered feared, abject, and undesired. These creatures are warnings or cautionary tales. Monsters are also hybrids, part human or worse, formerly human. For all this otherness, monstrosities are what is revealed to us. In this aspect, Aliens of Manila gains momentum in its revelations. These are performers dressed in news assemblages of balloons clustered together that, when worn, look like a hybrid between a human and an amoeba. Plastic hoses coiled together and worn by men in drinking sessions at the street are rendered to look like one of those oddball villains in 1970s Japanese live-action superhero TV series with monsters with giant latex quivering limbs. Despite the sheer difference of these people in Leeroy New's alien suits, they seem to be not out of place in Manila's gritty street scenes. New speaks of his creations as a means of aliens landing in Manila. Yet though they stand out for a bit, they tend to blend into the life of the city. The performers in New's works are either dancing, emerging from lacerating from the material, or simply walking, standing, doing ordinary acts, which highlights a crucial message, which is that plastic materials have intertwined with human corporeality. Our narratives are tied to the plastic materials that we use and discard every day, which many have then disposed of, thus transforming Manila itself into an alien landscape, groaning with plastic-addled sludges and the slow trudge of people that walk through and walk with these trash. Aliens of Manila is a work of satire riffing off from the hugely popular internet phenomenon of Humans of New York, or HONY, in which the American photographer Brandon Stanton goes around the city of New York, sometimes in cities outside the US, to photograph people and then render their stories as quirky, inspirational captions as social media posts. These are narratives of people to be consumed as daily doses of inspiration to stave off the truly monstrous situation of modern life, which is alienation. In New's work, the aliens may have served as a backdrop to situate the other, but it can also highlight alienation. Via what Leeroy New calls an incongruence, one finds the situation to be a stark reminder of a monstrous existence in Metro Manila. His performers are seen queuing at the notoriously long lines of Manila's Metro Rail transit. They stand wearing Leeroy New's alien costume among the throngs of exasperated people, which offers a sharp reality via the absurd. This is the rub of Aliens of Manila, to have these near comical figures of the other, but in the scenes that are familiar. Situation of poverty, inefficiency, and neglect. It is crucial to note that these costumes are sourced from the everyday. These aliens demonstrate alienation in the city and blurs the line between the odious and the accepted. It is notable that New's art piece is hedged on improvisation and responsiveness. This is plasticity as a methodological approach. New's praxis is to transform these ordinary materials into a fraught body demonstrating modern living, at once unsure of belonging and at the same time blending into a modern cosmopolitan behemoth like Manila. The plasticity on how these artists reconfigure what is discarded and what is ordinary to something that can change the landscape, to something that is replete with familiar ritual, and ultimately to its transformative aspects and challenge many who see art as traditionally uplifting or art as a form of instruction. These works are clarion calls of reckoning that if you address climate concerns, then you must look through climate justice, which is to firstly address economic inequality that feeds the neoliberalized, globalized economy that relies on extraction capitalism, cheap labor, and produce what we see in Manila, a city life that is steeped in inequalities and inequities, as vast as Manila's many mountain ranges of trash. Thank you. Maraming salamat. Mabuhay.